Well, great. Welcome, everybody. We have a lot to cover, so we're just going to get right into it. My name is Ben, and I'm going to be kind of emceeing this session. I'm with Coder. A few logistics before we get started. We have a chat and a Q&A section that our team will be monitoring. We do have a pretty kind of packed agenda with things to discuss with the Anthropic team, but we will be surfacing some of those questions throughout the session, but we also have a dedicated Q&A time towards the end. So we're aiming on leaving about 15 or 20 minutes to cover your questions as well. So I'll start by introducing myself, and then we'll just go around the horn. I'm Ben. I am the VP of Product at Coder. I have had the pleasure of working with Jacqueline and the Anthropic team for the last year or so, and I'm really excited to kick this off and learn more about Anthropic's environment.
I'm Kyle. I'm co-founder of Coder, and I'm very obviously a huge fan of Anthropic and probably in the top percentile of users of Sonnet Opus.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline. I'm an engineer at Anthropic. I've been here for about 10 months and working with Coder, having a great collaboration. And so I'll pass it to Kat.
Hey, I'm Kat. I'm the product manager for Claude Code, and really excited about to share how we use Claude Code and Coder.
Awesome. So for some of you who are in the waiting room, we kicked off this with a poll. Now is a good time to fill out the poll if you haven't already. We're really interested to kind of understand what different people's familiarity with Claude Code is, how often you've used it, things like that. So I guess while folks are filling this out, Kat, how would you describe Claude Code?
Yeah, so Claude Code is an agentic coding tool that for now lives in the terminal. The reason that we designed it this way is to make it really extensible, customizable, hackable, so that you can give the agents more information about your unique dev environment and any other inputs, and just like make sure that you're able to customize it. We also designed it this way so that you can flexibly run it in your own environment, such as on Coder. And yeah, we're excited to continue to make sure this is possible. We think that this is one of the most flexible ways to bring a coding agent into your workflow because it runs in a terminal. It's compatible with most dev setups. You can run it within the terminal section of your IDE provider or your IDE of choice. Yeah, we think that this is one of the best ways to meet the majority of developers where they are.
Yeah, something I'm showing now is the Claude Code terminal. I asked it to walk through a code base, and you can see that it's able to split up tasks into several to-dos, and it's essentially a great onboarding tool. So this is something we're now recommending to all new employees at Coder as they're getting familiar with the code base, is essentially to chat with it through a terminal instance. As Kat mentioned, though, Claude Code is extremely flexible, and there's a number of different ways to run it, one of which is through Coder. So we sent out another poll. I think there's a button that you can press to get to the second poll. And we're just looking to understand the audience's level of familiarity with Coder. And to show kind of what Coder is a platform for remote developer environments. And it can run a suite of tools, one of which being Claude Code. And you can see here, it really lets you start to use these agents in a composable way, meaning it's running entirely in the background. I could close my laptop and the agent continues to work, and it's running in a fully isolated environment. It also can give developers access to an IDE so that they could kind of develop alongside Claude Code, whether it's in the browser or desktop. And we're really excited about this because it's just one way to run Claude Code in multiple instances at once. So as you can see on this screen, we actually have 3 agents all running in the background working on various tasks. So with that, let's get into the questions. Jacqueline, before Coder, you were working on developer experience and dev environments at companies like Robinhood and Meta. What brought you into developer experience in the first place? And what are some of the projects you're working on at Anthropic?
Yeah, I honestly have been enjoying developer experience. I didn't know exactly what to expect, but after I entered the field, I never felt like I want to leave, majorly because I really enjoy building things that people I know love using, and I'm generally very interested in productivity space as a whole. I think the proximity with the customers matters a lot. I love just being able to, gather feedback and improve workflows for people who sit next to me. As to what I'm working at Anthropic, I have been focusing on remote developer environments, majorly leveraging Coder as the control plane and configure environments for people to have one-click, everything setting up all at once, ready to go kind of experience. And recently been pivoting more into the agentic environments, configuring environments for agents to run.
Very cool. Yeah, it's great to have a customer that sits next to you where you can just tap them on the shoulder and ask them for feedback versus having to go through hoops to talk to them. So this is a question both for Jacqueline and Kat. Let's start with Kat. So developers can sometimes be particularly opinionated about their existing tools and workflows. How do you gracefully introduce new tooling and environments to developers into the kind of existing developer population at Anthropic?
Yeah, so when we thought about like what is like the AI tool we should build, one of the key things that we realized is that everyone uses a different IDE. Everyone has like a different workflow, and the one thing that we found in common with everyone is that almost everyone uses a terminal, and this means that because Claude Code is a terminal interface, it's compatible with VS Code. It's compatible with all the IntelliJ IDEs. It's compatible even if you don't use an IDE. And so, I think the form factor was really important for just making sure we could meet every developer where they already are working. And this has made the adoption curve a lot easier. I do think that there's even more room to make Claude Code more accessible to a larger range of engineers. I think right now it resonates particularly well with like infrastructure and backend engineers. And increasingly, we do want to evolve outside of strictly a terminal just to make sure that people who are less comfortable in a terminal or people who are more tech adjacent are able to also get value from it.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Oh, go ahead, Jacqueline.
Yeah, I also want to double tap on just meeting people where they are. Oftentimes, I found the best change is making changes to the implementation and leaving the tools the same. So if it's a CLI tool, I will often try to add additional functionalities or features in the CLIs that people already use in the less intrusive way as much as possible. Yeah.
Sweet. Something we're curious about is like, what does development look like at Anthropic? Like, if I start at Anthropic, do I get like an IDE with Cursor, or am I like given an infinite Claude Code budget, or like what is the flow look like?
Yeah, so internally, I think most people are using a combination of VS Code and IntelliJ. Every engineer does have access to Claude Code. I believe most people also have access to GitHub Copilot, and some people have access to other IDEs that startups are building. In general, we pretty much encourage people to like use AI as aggressively as possible, because I think through the process of experimentation, through giving the AI agents really hard tasks, that's the only way for you to actually push the boundary of what the AI agents are capable of or not. And oftentimes we find that people are surprised by what agents are able to do. Even people who are really in the weeds on training these models are sometimes surprised at like, oh, wow, like I gave it a stack trace and it immediately understood like this like obscure GCP error and how to fix it, and it saved me like 4 hours as a result. So yeah, I would say we encourage a lot of exploration. And then there's also this question of like, how do you now review code now that AI generates so much of it? And I think this question varies a bit between teams, but ultimately we find that the responsibility falls on the author of the PR. So like definitely doesn't fall on the PR reviewer, it falls on like the author. And the things that Claude Code does to make this easier on the author is a lot of folks do like test-driven development so that you have more confidence in Claude Code's changes before you make a PR submit for review. And there's other kinds of verification. For example, if you're making a front-end change, you can tell Claude Code to take a screenshot of the resulting app, save the screenshot and show it to you. That way you can visually verify, which is sometimes a bit easier as a first pass than reading the code.
Nice. And then I'm curious, like, how many people at Anthropic primarily use Claude Code as their like workflow tool? And then like, how did the dogfooding start of Claude Code? Like when it was incepted, was it kind of like given to the team before it was released broadly? Or how did it kind of get rolled out?
Yeah, so Claude Code was like a project that Boris on the team started just to become more familiar with our public APIs. And when he shared it, he actually realized that he was using it a lot. And then it kind of spread in these concentric circles where he was on labs at the time. And then his team was using it within labs, and then labs was using it. And then it spread across the product eng team and then into the research team. By the time we decided to launch it externally, most technical ants were DAOs already of Claude Code.
Yeah, I think the original question was like, what is developer workflow like Anthropic? And as you can tell, like the journey has changed at a very fast pace. When I first joined, we are so highly dependent on AI assistants within the IDE. But towards the end of last year, Boris started Claude Code, and that has become just the most common tool that we've been using within the company. So I would foresee the rate of change continue to sustain. And next time when we talk about this, it might be different.
Very cool.
So a question that we get a lot is, what are some concrete use cases for coding agents in the enterprise? And a lot of platform engineers that we talk to kind of struggle to find clear ways to bring Claude Code into the software development lifecycle. There's a great single player mode, right? You install the CLI, you use it, and it's magic. But I think for a lot of enterprises, that's less secure or appealing in some cases. So I guess what are some cases where you've integrated Claude Code maybe deeper into the software development lifecycle, whether that's in CI or planning or tests or something like that, where it feels a lot more approachable for someone rather than trying a new tool on your local machine?
Yeah, for CI, we definitely have integration with the externally launched Claude. People can add Claude and interact with Claude on GitHub interface. Internally, we have some code review assistant tools that we can run a / command to ask Claude to help review APR, for example. We also have something that we leverage Claude to see whether, given a improved PR, whether we should ask for another human approval, just to make sure that there is no additional change after the PR is stamped. And of course, like fixing CI tests is another common use case that we leverage Claude to do. And past the whole development lifecycle, reaching to when the code is actually running, we also leverage Claude to help debug jobs, trying to look at Kubernetes logs or trying to run a set of CLI tools to check the GCP or AWS resources and see if they are actually still running as intended. And usually Claude is very good at finding the root cause and helping to steer humans to the right fix.
It sounds like you all are putting Claude everywhere. I'm curious if you have any cases where you put Claude somewhere and then took it out because maybe it wasn't working, or you had to kind of redefine the workflow a second time or a third time. In our case, we had Claude Code creating a lot of pull requests basically without any developer review, and it just created a bunch of spam for us. So that would be maybe one example where we saw and like, well, now we need to kind of adjust the constraints or readjust the workflow. I'm curious if you all have any examples of that.
Yeah, internally we have still been pretty intentional on triggering Claude. I would say most of the Claude workflows are triggered by humans rather than triggered by some automation. So we actually have not seen as much of these. I don't know, Kat, if you've seen more of these in the open source or external land.
Yeah, we've also there are a lot of features that we build in Claude Code that we don't actually end up shipping because we feel like the success rate isn't high enough. And I agree that developers are very sensitive to spam because once you spam them, they're like, okay, turn this whole thing off. This is terrible. And so there's a long list of features that we've tried out that we just felt like, hey, the models aren't quite there yet. And so let's not do it. But I do think eventually we do want Claude Code to be quite proactive. So we want it to be able to read across all your previous sessions and extract insights for future sessions. And then beyond that, to be able to extract insights from all your teammates' sessions as well to, for example, keep a Claude MD up to date. This is definitely the direction that we think models will head in. And it's an area where I think the models will improve a lot. Some other areas where I think Claude Code's particularly, I would say the three main areas where we found that Claude Code is very successful is one, it's really great for onboarding. I think you guys mentioned that you do this at Coder. It's one of the first things that we introduce to all new hires because it is the fastest way for you to get up to speed on a new code base. And it also means that new hires can get work done whenever they want to work and not just when their mentor is online. And it just makes the feedback loop so much faster. The second thing is it's really great for on-call triage. I think this is very similar to what Jacqueline was saying. If you have an on-call playbook, you can just put that into your / command, like an on-call / command, share context with these are the tools that and then give Claude Code access to the tools that are mentioned in the on-call playbook. And then Claude can normally just take a stack trace and roughly root cause it, whether it's finding the culprit GitHub PR or just proposing a change off of main. The third transition that we've been seeing is a move from docs to prototypes. With Claude Code, it's much easier to get a working prototype quickly. It might not be mergeable in a one-shot way, but at least you can build something that works, that you can interact with, and give your team a sense of, hey, what would this feature feel like? And I think that's a lot more visceral of an experience than writing docs. So we've been seeing this shift both within Anthropic and with a lot of the customers we talk to. We call it docs to demos.
I have certainly experienced this. In the past hackathon, I was contributing to a new code base, new language, which I have no context of at all. But I was able to leverage Claude and actually get something working, a demo working within the day.
Nice. That's cool. And Anthropic said previously, I know we talked about this earlier, and the numbers are a little who knows, but Anthropic has previously stated that 70 to 80% of Claude Code is written by Claude Code. And that number aside, what do you feel like the models need to get better at for us to hit 100%?
I actually think a lot of this is product overhang and so some of it is model, but a lot of it is actually product overhang. Because a lot of times when the agent stops working, it's not because, or at least, okay, so to step back, Claude Code is actually a smaller code base. And so naturally agents are able to do a lot more in it because it's pretty constrained. One of the things that we've noticed is that when the agent finishes, it doesn't always know how to fully verify its work. And we think that adding more affordances for the model to be able to, for example, spin up its own version of Claude Code with the local code and test it out and actually get signal on whether or not its code change had the intended effect would be really important, because unless the model is able to understand whether its change worked or not, it doesn't really know whether it should stop or what the error is. And right now we're kind of in this phase where the agents are good enough that now they're making end-to-end PRs, and it's on us to give the model like helpers so that it can actually test those PRs. And then once these helpers exist, then the agent can iterate against these helpers and give you much more high quality results. I think the other dimension that the models need to get better in is just like general code taste. We find that the models sometimes just like make the change at the wrong level of abstraction, or like the implementation is far too complex. Sometimes it's far too simple and it's just an if statement. And there's just this level of like human judgment that we are going to make the models a lot better at.
Nice. Do you think that's like just maybe more abstractly, like, do you think that's on whatever the raw quote unquote like intelligence is for it to explore more, or do you think it's maybe limited by like context window and like only reading the right parts of a file, or where do you think that sits in like the model improvement, out of curiosity?
The code taste part?
Yeah, the code taste part.
Yeah, I don't think it's context. I think it's just like it's like making sure the model sees a wide variety of code bases that are similar to the ones of our users, and like having it understand what is like good code. I'm not really sure how to like. I don't think it's like as simple as just making sure it can reason across a long context, because sometimes you see these like shorter transcripts where the model still makes mistakes about how to implement a change. Yeah, I think it's a hard to pinpoint skill.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I couldn't explain how I do it, so I definitely can't explain how the models do it. I completely agree with that. So we saw Anthropic use Claude to build a vending machine. You guys wrote a fun blog on that. I know it's in your office on the lunch floor. And I'm curious if there are any other creative examples of Claude entering the real world, because right now we kind of live in this like software world of AI where it doesn't, like I don't really interact with AI when I'm like driving to work.
Yeah.
But have you guys experimented with any other things in the real world?
I'm very focused on coding.
Fair.
So no Claude car that we can expect anytime soon.
Yeah.
Oh, if only. Claude
Yeah.
dog.
We have a partnership with Alexa if you want to talk to Claude. Yeah, Alexa from Amazon.
Cool. Well, we talked about this a little when you were talking about how Claude Code excels with a smaller code base like Claude Code. From your perspective, what is the perfect repo setup for Claude Code, both in terms of maybe the language and tech stack, but then also what are things that you can do with Claude Code to make it more effective inside of a given repo?
Yeah. I think a good general principle is if a human can understand the code base and it's like well documented and like variable naming is clear and the abstractions are clear, then like Claude will tend to do better. If there's situations where your code base is littered with gotchas that like require knowing historical context, Claude will be as confused as a human who's dropped into that code base would be. I think making sure the abstractions are correct is really important. There are some languages that Claude is a bit better at than others, but I don't think it's to a degree. Like one, we care about making Claude better at all languages, and I don't think the difference is to such a degree that you should like rewrite your code base to a new language just to use Claude, because we'll aim to meet you where you are.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess on the topic of workflows, we saw a question in the chat around how is the developer workflow with Claude Code different than the researcher workflow? And maybe as well, besides just Claude Code, Jacqueline, curious kind of on the developer environment and infrastructure side as well.
Yeah, generally we have monorepo with some caveat, like we have smaller repositories, but all of us engineers and researchers contribute to the same repository, and the same environments, which means that we have access to the same tools. The things that could be a little bit different is just the specific kinds of tools and jobs that gets run. So for example, I don't run a training job where RL run, but in terms of the AI assistance power kind of tooling, this is very similar. We leverage Claude Code and we just tell Claude Code the tools that I use, and Claude Code is able to reason very well around it and be able to help troubleshoot as much as possible. So I think one key point here is having one single abstraction layer for both engineers or researchers, or having one single abstraction layer or repository or tool sets for all of the different teams to use is going to be key, because now we can grow through the economics of scale. We can all invest and make the Cloud IMD for our monorepo better and hence benefit everyone.
Nice. I'm curious, what kind of tasks have y'all found Claude Code is just like bad at? Maybe it's like, an example is like, if I write sloppy code, it will definitely produce me more sloppy code. It's kind of like an amplifier. But like, for example, Claude Code is really good for me at like making website changes. But if I ask it to like write a database migration that like does some kind of like gnarly stuff, it starts to get a little trickier unless I do like a lot of specific setup. So I'm curious if there are any tasks that you're like, we don't do this with Claude Code intentionally because it's not there yet.
I think there's a lot of tasks that are at the boundary of what Claude Code is currently capable of. I think with enough handholding, it can pretty much do any task, and it's just a matter of whether you prefer to prompt an agent versus doing it yourself. I think there's a lot of tasks that are like actually at the boundary, though, of what Claude Code is capable of, and this includes things like large refactors and to improving test coverage across your repo. I think the difference between success and failure in a lot of these cases is giving Claude Code very specific directions on what your expected outcome is and how Claude Code should verify its work. And then, especially if you want to, for example, update 100 test files or refactor like a large number of directories, it often is good to just start with one or two, see the ways in which Claude Code fails, iterate on these instructions, and then slowly scale up over time. It's definitely an iterative process, though, and definitely recommend trying it because Claude Code often can succeed, but it takes a few times of like giving it like maybe like less specific instructions, and then you're like, oh, okay, it doesn't realize this thing that I know is common sense, but the model just like doesn't know this about our code base. Adding it, trying again, and then eventually getting to a set of instructions where Claude Code clearly understands what you want and then is able to act more autonomously.
One other question in that vein, is the temperature like at 1 by default for Claude Code? Yeah, okay, I thought so. Just so like for everyone watching, like if you increase the temperature, it's like kind of more randomness almost in the output. And so I kind of assumed that it would be at 1, but that's cool. Nice.
This is a good segue into some more advanced workflows with agents. I've heard of the term multi-Claude before. Kat, can you kind of walk us through what multi-Claude means?
Yeah, so a lot of users multi-Claude. What this means is running multiple Claude Code instances at the same time on your local machine. So there's a few different ways that people do this. One way is a user will run Claude in multiple different repos that are non-overlapping. The reason people will run Claude in multiple repos is to make sure that Claude doesn't make changes that confuse other Claude instances. For people who only work in one repo, we find that people use GitHub work trees, or they just hold multiple copies of the repo and instantiate one Claude in each. I'd probably recommend this over running 2 Claudes in the same repo at the same time, because each quad might change the same files that the other quad is working on, and that would confuse both agent trajectories. So the TLDR is, a lot of people love to run multiple quads at the same time. It's best to instantiate them in non-overlapping repos so that they don't accidentally step on each other.
How many multi-clods do you think you can cognitively handle at the same time?
I believe that somebody could handle up to like 6 or so.
Okay.
I think more common is 2 to 4.
Yeah,
And then
3 is
we've
my
seen
sweet
a lot
spot.
of videos of 12. So
Jacqueline, what about you? Do you multi-clod?
I do multi-cloud, but I try to not babysit them as much as possible because, yeah, I will say 3 is my max. I cannot have more than 3 quads. And so sometimes I would trigger a quad through Slack. It will go off asynchronously, run on its own, and which means that there's no steering involved. Also means that the results is going to be with a higher variance of whether it's working or not. That being said, that allows me to have more Claude running in parallel.
Ben, should we just hop over to talk about security, just so we can answer a lot of questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, I think this is a great segue to security, actually. So with Claude running, on your local machine or in the background without a lot of human intervention, security often becomes a big topic. How do you think about security, especially as these agents begin to run more independently with less human approval and intervention? And then I guess the second point to that is, even when I do run it on my local machine, sometimes I'll just blindly accept whatever it needs to do rather than actually looking over it, which is not necessarily like a great security model. So how are you thinking about security with things like Claude Code as they start to run more headlessly, I suppose, or more in the background?
yeah, security is super important to us. So we've built it with security as like a foundational principle. We also use a very similar version of Claude Code internally. The only difference is that we have some new experimental features that we're not sure about launching yet. And so what we release externally is like, from a security perspective, the same as what we have internally. The first thing that we've built is the first thing that I think is important to know is how we handle our permission system. So out of the box, Claude Code only has read-only permissions. Any additional edits require approval from a human. So that includes editing files, running tests, executing any bash commands, any non-read-only bash commands. And users can control whether they approve the action once or approve them always in the future. And then we also this is quite important because this means by default, the user has to approve everything. We also restrict what folders Claude Code can access. So Claude Code can only read files within the directory that you initialize it in. So it's not able to escape your repo and then suddenly see everything in your file system. This at least scopes Claude Code's access. And we also warn users to only use Claude Code in directories that you trust. This just helps mitigate prompt injections and other kinds of risks. Prompt fatigue is a real concern. The main way that we've been working around prompt fatigue is making it really easy for you to allow list commands that you know are safe. And so the more that you allow list known safe commands, the fewer prompts you see, and the less fatigue that you get because it's fewer prompts. We also design our permission system so that it's really easy to allow list commands. If you really think about it, every command, every tool that Claude Code has could have been a bash command. The reason that we actually separate it out into edit file, read file, search is so that you can grant permissions at a more granular level. We also have some protections against prompt injection. So, for example, when you use web search or web fetch, we put all the results into a classifier model that just understands, hey, is there prompt injection here? before passing it back to the main agent loop. There's a few more things that we do. We have pretty comprehensive security docs online, but yeah, just want to reiterate, this is like very important, and we're still iterating on like how best to make sure this is safe for everyone.
That's cool. Super hard problem. I always run Claude with dangerously allow everything, which I know that I shouldn't. But it never tries to do anything bad for me. So, you know, it's at least a good model, at least a nice model. Very kind. So,
Knock on wood.
I'm curious how you're thinking about isolation on like the environment layer versus on the agent layer. What would be kind of some takeaways for enterprises who are looking to run kind of hardened Claude Code infrastructure for agents?
Yeah, I can take that. There's this lethal traffic guideline proposed by Simon Wilson that I've been kind of following, which is basically saying there are three major properties. The very first one is access to private proprietary data. The second one is internet access. And the third one is whether it has access to untrusted data or not. Oftentimes, internet access and untrusted data go hand in hand, but not necessarily if, let's say, you have web crawled a bunch of data and you put it onto your file system. So the guideline is to make sure that you never have all three in your environments because of two major risks that we want to prevent. The very first one is data exfiltration. For example, if you have your social security number or your proprietary enterprise information on your file system, that Claude Code has access, and Claude Code has access to untrusted data, meaning that it could get prompt injected, and Claude Code has internet access. If we just allow permissions for all of the tools, then there is a risk of getting data exfiltrated externally. So that is certainly something that we always want to prevent. As Kat mentions, configuring tool sets is a great way to achieve that. But if we want to allow more agenticness to Claude Code, then I think hardening the environment is a better approach to let Claude Code has as much freedom as much as possible. So that is a big risk. The second risk we definitely want to also prevent is the destruction of like any kind of infrastructure, for example, like production databases or anything that you deem as crucial to your own business. It could include, PII of customer data. It could also just be your own cluster. Like we want to make sure that Claude Code can never destruct these kind of critical infrastructure. And to do that, the best way of doing this is actually having a very mature infrastructure in general to make sure that no single actor, whether it's intern employees or agents, can do egregious behavior like such. However, I think it's very hard for any enterprises to achieve this in one single step. It takes many, many years, even decades, for a lot of large companies to achieve that. Therefore, one thing that we have been implementing within our agentic environments is removing credentials as much as possible and injecting agent identities that has very limited access to our infrastructure. So I would highly recommend everyone to think along the sides of, okay, what are the access that Claude has if we were to give Claude all the tool sets?
Yeah, I remember some of those feature requests. So, I mean, it seems like Claude Code and Anthropic in general has a pretty solid focus on enterprise use cases with stuff like kind of organization-wide policies for Claude Code, as well as support for things like AWS Bedrock if folks want to run their models in AWS. Was this enterprise support out of kind of an internal need, or has it always been a goal from the beginning for coding agents like Claude Code to be used by some of the largest enterprises with these security concerns in mind?
Yeah, because Anthropic takes security so seriously, we felt like regardless, we would have to build a tool that is secure. And when we looked at, okay, who else would this resonate with? A lot of the potential other people who would care about this are larger enterprises. And a lot of those folks really strongly prefer to use Bedrock or Vertex to access Anthropic APIs. And so out of the gate, we felt like it was really important to have first-class Bedrock and Vertex support, which we launched with and which we continue to support.
I'm curious, what are the most common ways that enterprises are adopting Claude Code right now? And what kind of use cases do y'all like really promote? If someone comes and they're like, we want to adopt Claude Code for the enterprise, what are you like, here's the first thing you should do it on? Or is it more so kind of just organic because it's all kind of new?
Yeah, it's pretty bottoms up currently. So a lot of times it's like an individual developer who's been trying Claude Code on the weekends and then really likes it and decides to bring it to work. And then we'll help them get like through procurement and to set up a pilot with a small group. We're not that opinionated about who should be in this pilot group. We try to just like pick a few folks from across the org. Sometimes it's like 2 teams, or we're pretty flexible because Claude Code is a really general tool, and we found that it works well for pretty much every engineer background. Yeah, so the kinds of use cases that we encourage people to start with are things like asking like code-based understanding, solving like constrained feature, like building constrained features or solving like well-defined bugs. And then we encourage people to branch out after that. So it's about like starting small and like getting a feel for what Claude Code can handle. And then as you understand the quirks of Claude Code, like where it's really good, where it fails, then you can invest in a Claude MD to give it more organizational context and code-based context. You can invest in building scripts and other automations and other tools that Claude Code can call, customizing your slash commands, adding MCP servers. There's like a lot of depth in configuration because we make Claude Code very customizable. And so we've seen enterprises get really deep into making very detailed Claude MDs, a ton of custom slash commands, adding all the MCP servers for the tools that they use.
Sweet.
I think this is a good segue into some of the more kind of power users and use cases. And I've actually seen in some of your materials that you actually refer to Claude Code as kind of 2 separate products, right? There's the CLI that you can run, and then there's the SDK that you can use to extend. How are people using the SDK, and how do you see that evolving over time?
Yeah, so the initial, so there's like maybe 3 categories of ways people use the Claude Code SDK. The first one is to actually just make like a wrapper around Claude Code, like a light wrapper, like a GUI or something. And this is just because, you know, a terminal interface is like hard for some folks to use. It's like very different than if you're used to using web apps. And we found that some of our customers just want to wrap that into something more friendly before distributing it. So that's one case. The second case is Claude Code is a very general coding agent, but a lot of people have want to make it more specific to one use case or one role. So we've seen people customize the Claude Code SDK to make a security engineer, a site reliability engineer, an on-call assistant. And the Claude Code SDK lets you bring your own system prompt and your own tools. So it's pretty straightforward to add like the specific instructions and additional tools that you would need for these roles. Increasingly, we're really, really excited about people using Claude Code to build general agents. And yeah, so right now the Claude Code SDK lets you bring a system prompt and tools. What you get out of the box is the core agents loop, the permission system, prompt caching, like a lot of the nice to haves are handled for you. And so we've seen people experiment with making this into a legal agent, making this into a finance agent, making it into like like an agent that powers user-facing features that are not coding related at all. And this is a direction that we're going to continue to push in because we're really excited about people building general agents on top of the Claude Code SDK.
That's super cool. Yeah, we have a lot of people in Coder who are not even in like software that end up using a lot of these agent things to automate parts of their life. And I am very bullish on outsourcing my intelligence. I have been for a long time now. And so it's great. Last question, and then we'll do Q&A. It is, what's next on the roadmap for Claude Code?
Yeah, we would love for Claude Code to be available on like more surfaces that engineers are on. So right now it's in the terminal and you can invoke it on GitHub, but there's so many more places that you do work day to day. And so that's a direction that we're going to push in. The second thing is Claude Code is most successful when it has access to all the tools that a developer has. So think like being able to understand the discussions on Slack and being able to pull in the PRD, product review docs, and like engineering specs and Jira tickets, customer support tickets, stuff like that. And so making sure Claude Code has access to all the information that developers do. We're also really excited to push on the SDK. So just making sure that it has feature parity with Claude Code, the CLI experience. And then please keep feedback coming on GitHub issues, where we're really investing in making sure the SDK is powerful and flexible and supports building arbitrary agents.
Awesome.
That's a great segue to our first question, which is, how do the team solve for tightly coupled systems when dealing with large code bases, or in even some cases, multiple repos? And then the second part of the question is, how does Coder help with those constraints? I'm happy to take that one unless you all have any thoughts there too.
For the former, I think it's mostly about one, making sure Claude Code has access to all the relevant repos. So for example, if you have like five repos that Claude Code needs to edit to make a change, then you should probably instantiate Claude in like a folder above those repos so that's able to access everything. Or you can use add dir, which is a new feature that we have to give an existing Claude Code section access to more repos. The second thing is, I think it's mainly about making sure Claude Code has the right context. So the same way that you would onboard an engineer to making changes across multiple repos, you should make sure that you share that context with Claude Code, maybe in the form of Claude MD or a custom / command. At the end of the day, Claude Code only knows what it's able to read in your code base, what it's able to fetch via MCP servers, and what you tell it. And just making sure that all the context about how you would like the change to be made is there, I think will get you a long way.
Cool. I also saw a couple of questions about, oh, go ahead, Jacqueline, sorry.
I was gonna touch upon your second question. The thing which we do allow people to configure coder environments with is having multi-repository support, and which allows people to say, oh, I want to work in these set of repositories and drop Claude in to the environment. And in that particular setup, Claude can do a very good job.
Cool. I saw a lot of questions about testing as well. One question was around, do you use Claude Code to generate tests? And the other question was actually more on the other side, which was, do you ever prevent Claude Code from editing tests so that it always has to conform to a test and maybe doesn't make changes there as well?
Yeah, we find that with the Claude 4 series of models, it's a lot better at not editing the tests. I suppose I haven't experimented with actually hard preventing Claude Code from editing the tests, though Claude Code is extensible enough that you should be able to. Like, for example, you could at the beginning have Claude Code write the tests. You could have it copy the tests outside of the repo to some other file that Claude Code isn't able to edit. And then you could add a hook at the very end when Claude Code tries to make a PR that like copies the tests back, runs them, and that way you know that the tests weren't modified. I don't know if it's worth it to go that far, but Claude Code is customizable enough with hooks that you should be able to actually force the tests aren't changed.
Generally, adding a prompt will be sufficient to tell Claude Code to not change the test.
One of my favorite use cases is I actually sometimes I'll use AI for it, but sometimes not. I'll like write a function and then I get AI to write just like a filthy amount of tests for it. That's one of my favorite use cases, and I'm just like never edit the source file, but always create a whole swarm of tests around it. Because you don't really care about what the test code looks like as much. So it's kind of a nice use case.
Great, so that's testing. I see some questions about sandboxing and kind of running isolated Claude Code instances. I'm curious, maybe if we talked about it a lot, but we could just drill like a level deeper. Kind of, Jacqueline, maybe this is for you. How, maybe on an infrastructure level, how do you leverage kind of Claude Code's existing sandboxing features, and then what else do you do to like sandbox your environments? Like what does a Claude Code environment look like at Anthropic for one that runs more agentically, as you put it?
Yeah, we certainly have some Claude Code instances where we run in environments that is a lot more permissive, and we configure tool sets to limit read-only access to our Kubernetes cluster, for example. But to your question of if we want to even enable beyond read-only and we want to enable Claude to do as much as as possible, we have configured environments where there is no internet access except a very few allowed domain. And on top of that, we allow all of the tool usages because in this particular case, it doesn't matter if it tries to run curl, it will still fail because it doesn't have internet access to a lot of the websites. We do disallow web fetch just to avoid confusing Claude as much as possible. And on top of that, because like limiting internet access does decrease the capabilities of the agents, we do add MCP servers with the very specialized configurations. Like for example, maybe read only across all of the GitHub issues or GitHub PRs. We have exposed these as MCP servers. So in this particular case, I wouldn't necessarily need to give the agents a full GitHub credential and allowing github.com as a domain to avoid Claude to push sensitive code to a public PR, for example.
Awesome. I see you talked a little bit about this in your last question, but someone else was asking about just baseline recommendations for using MCP to augment Claude Code. I've learned a couple of things as I've started using MCP, which is there's a such thing as too many tools, and then the agent gets overwhelmed. But I'm curious, kind of, how would you recommend people go from a more vanilla Claude Code instance to begin adding MCP, and what are some of the things they should begin? Like, what are some things they should consider as they're going through that?
Yeah, while registering MCP tools, definitely make sure that the tool descriptions are clear. Avoid collisions as much as possible because, as you mentioned, Claude can get very confused if there is, not knowing which specific tools to use. But also, Claude is very good at figuring out the tools just through its own memory. For example, if you tell Claude through Claude MD that there is this particular CLI tool that it can use that calls into a particular service that you have spun up internally, Claude will actually do that very well as well. So it doesn't necessarily need to be MCP. I think MCP is a great abstraction, but if MCP introduces more overhead or friction, just tell Claude the set of tools that you normally use. Claude is very good at just coding like a human.
Nice. Someone asked, which I don't know if you can answer this, Kat, but I'm curious if native support for parallelism is coming. It's something that Nathan asked. Maybe like I know y'all have some docs on like Git work trees and things of that nature, but I'm curious if anything native for that is coming into Claude Code.
We don't have a shift date yet.
That's a great
That's
answer.
top of mind.
That's funny. Let me see what else.
I guess kind of on the parallelism topic, I saw a question about the differences between kind of using a sub-agent versus multi-clotting and how to think about those two things separately, I suppose.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest benefits of subagents is that it will speed up any given task by doing parallel actions at the same time as much as possible. But subagents are still like, you should have multiple quads if you have different tasks. You should have one quad per like independent task. Subagents still work on the same task as the main agent. It just speeds it up a bit more. Or like if you have custom subagents, it can bring like a security perspective and a design perspective and a product perspective, but it's still on the same core task. So that's how I decide whether to use subagents or multi-quad.
Cool. I see one question that I have to shamelessly plug, which is, do people leverage Coder to do multi-Claude and avoid race conditions? Yes, that's one of the top use cases, is you can have a bunch of Claude instances running. They're remote, they're sandboxed, and you don't have to worry about disrupting your local branch or repo or any type of kind of security risk. So that's a very common use case. Oh, here's a really interesting question. How do you evaluate new models and gain more confidence in exchanging them over time? Is that something you can speak to?
Jacqueline, do you want to?
New models. Well, I think generally we do a lot of very extensive validations and testing. We also work with a lot of the institutions to make sure that there is alignment and as much as possible. So it's very safe to interact with. So I think you can trust Anthropic that the newest models is always safe to use and it's going to be better than the previous ones.
Something that someone asked is, will Claude Code introduce a robust undo feature that doesn't rely on LLM calls? Presumably like some form of like, I think what is like classically called snapshotting.
Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
Oh, sorry. I said, will Claude Code introduce a robust undo feature that doesn't rely on LLM calls?
Yes, we are working on that. This is like the top requested feature.
Cool. And then for isolation, I know a lot of people just asked about like generally using Docker or it being like on a system level. And I'm curious what y'all are thinking about that, like for even more enhanced isolation.
Yeah, we've been debating Docker versus work trees. We haven't made a decision yet, but we're prototyping both, and we'll probably just release the one that feels better to use.
Well, we only have 2 minutes left here. Jacqueline, Kat, is there anything else y'all would like to ask or add or plug or anything like that?
Yeah, we're really excited about Claude Code being able to do longer horizon agentic tasks over time. And I think that's a great opportunity to run Claude Code in remote environments like Coder, since right now the models still need a bit of guidance, which is why the local interactive terminal interface works well. But over time, Claude Code will be able to do like 30 minutes, an hour longer of work productively. And in that case, you probably actually don't want to have to manage a bunch of work trees and Docker containers locally. And so I think the more future-looking thing to do is to set up your remote infrastructure so that when the models are ready, you already have that set up to go, and your engineers are able to kick off many Claude Code runs at the same time on different tasks.
Awesome.
Yeah. And for the shorter horizon, I think it's just great to get hands-on experience using Claude Code as much as possible. I think that's the best way of knowing where the limitation lies. And more than often, I would find that the limitation is actually coming from the lack of tools or the lack of knowledge of Claude, knowing which tools I can use. So just configuring those will already provide a lot of value for Claude-powered workflows and for the future agentic workflows too.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us in the webinar. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can feel free to ask or email us. You can just email me too. I'm just kyle@coder.com. So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks for having us.